Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today, I'm talking canines, cozies, and crime with award-winning author C.B. Wilson. C.B. writes the popular cozy pet mysteries, which are largely set against the backdrop of Barkview, the dog-friendliest city in America. The series' seventh and newest entry, AUSSIED to Death, was published earlier this summer. In a departure from Barkview, former reporter Cat Wright is taken on a surprise honeymoon to Australia, only to have her new husband Russ arrested on suspicion of murder. Not knowing the culture, the land, or the lingo, Cat finds that her best ally may just be Lizzie, an intelligent and intuitive Australian shepherd. Can the two solve the crime and save the day? C.B. Wilson's interest in mysteries dates back to a childhood experience with reading a Nancy Drew novel and rewriting the ending to her own satisfaction. She studied at the Gemology Institute of America, where she developed an affinity for diamonds. But a girl's true best friend is the four-legged furry kind, and her fascination with dogs and their devoted owners led her to write the cozy pet mysteries. As one Amazon reviewer offered, if you have never read one of C.B. Wilson's books, I truly believe you are missing out. And that would be a doggone shame. Now, C.B. Wilson tells us all about AUSSIED to Death, which has a little bit of bite and a whole lot of bark. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Central Booking. I am in conversation today with award-winning author C.B. Wilson, who writes the cozy pet mysteries, the newest of which is AUSSIED to Death. It's number 7. It is available right now for your reading pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me, John. I really appreciate it.
I am so thrilled to have you here. And before we get started in conversation, I do want to congratulate you on not one, but 2 Silver Falcone nominations for your earlier book. That is most excellent. So our kudos to you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm absolutely over the moon. It's exciting.
It's a good reason to be over the moon. I love it. All right. So AUSSIED to Death, which love the title, and obviously, there's some subtext to that. But I want to ask you about your protagonist, Cat Wright, because at the beginning of this book, she gets surprised with a honeymoon to Australia, and you think, oh, wonderful, romantic. And then things go very, very wrong for her when her new husband, Russ, he gets accused of murder. And not only is he accused of murder, which is bad enough, but it turns out that he's accused of killing somebody he knows from his past, who Cat knows very little about. So I'm wondering if you can tell us what the implications of this crime are, and also how it sort of changes Cat's understanding of her husband's past and who this person is that she just made a lifetime commitment to.
Well, it's funny. If you really cut it down to what the story is about, it's really about a woman learning to believe in herself and the choices that she's made. So here's this woman on her honeymoon, excited to death, and she knows that her husband has had a past. He's been in law enforcement, and there are things that have happened that he doesn't want to talk about. And here she falls right in the middle of it and finds out that not only did he know the person who was murdered, but he worked with him on a case that was very controversial. So she has to find it in herself to believe in him. And that's basically what happens as she goes through the book, is she believes in herself and her choices and in the man that she chose to spend the rest of her life with.
That is an excellent pitch. I am impressed. You really boiled that down to the essentials. I love it. And so, all right, I am going to ask you about setting, because as we mentioned, this book takes place in Australia, which is certainly a departure from Barkview, which is where earlier books are set. So I'm wondering if you can tell me how this change of place, and also, policing, investigation, how does this invigorate an ongoing series, but also challenge Cat's investigative prowess, because she's working under much different circumstances within a culture that she might not understand, and even, language and speech differences, on top of the fact that policing is not the same in Australia as it would be in America. So there are some complications there.
Well, why I chose Canine Cay is because that is where my husband and I honeymooned. It was an island called Lizard Island off the coast of northern Australia, and it was a magical place. When we were there, I absolutely fell in love with the beauty of the surroundings, and I've always wanted to write a story about this place. Well, lo and behold, I had to find something that to make it a little more interesting than yes, we had a wonderful time on this great island. And I think that happened because poor Cat now had to deal with all the crazy fun little things that my husband and I found when we went to Australia. And she didn't really understand all the language that was being said. It was a totally different world for her of what was going on. So it was very challenging for her also not to know anybody. Who can she ask for help? How does she solve a murder in a place that she hardly understands what they're saying, has no idea who to talk to? So the only thing she has is a dog. And this wonderful dog that is helping her, showing her the way. And she actually now has to learn to speak Aussie, which is the dog, in addition
Right.
to understanding people around her.
Well, that is the perfect transitional topic because I wanted to ask you about that Aussie, the Australian Shepherd, known as Lizzie, because she is actually the dog that belonged to, the victim in this story. And so she ends up basically being Cat's partner in crime. And Lizzie has an incredibly, unique personality that really does sort of lend itself to sleuthing. So I'm wondering if you can talk about how you endeavor, to bring specific breeds of dogs into a story that sort of works for their abilities. So if you wouldn't mind speaking, to Lizzie specifically in this book, but also more generally about, your canine counterparts to your human characters, because they are rendered incredibly dynamically. And I think sometimes people have trouble rendering, human characters dynamically, and you do that with people and with pets. So I would love it if you can talk about that process and what you hope to convey.
But Lizzie was the perfect dog for this particular story. And frankly, I crafted the mystery around the strengths of this particular breed. So as when she was looking for certain clues, an Australian Shepherd, I went to the traits the dog is good at. It's good at herding. It's very good at finding lots of energy. So it's lots of finding things. And it was very easy for this dog to help lead the heroine along. Like she's trying to tell Cat where to go next. And it's the frustration for the dog as well, going, come on, come on. And the heroine's like, I don't understand. So it was an evolution as well for Cat to understand how to read the dog and to understand how to use the traits of the dog to solve the mystery as well.
Sure. And if Cat's not doing what the dog wants her to do, the dog is gonna find a way to make her do that. But I'm wondering too, in your earlier books, you have explored all different breeds. So people obviously who love pets are gonna enjoy reading those books because each one brings in a very individualized pet character. And I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind speaking to that, more generally, and how it is that you actually go about developing those very dynamic pet characters to go along with your people, because they are not there, as furniture or backdrop. They are pretty much as important as the human characters in these books.
I'm so glad you said that. My favorite part of writing the book is actually doing the research on the animals themselves, of what their traits are and what it is that's the good part of the animal and the part that maybe not so much for this particular character. I mean, at the end of the day, I want people to understand that there is a perfect animal, there is a perfect dog for everyone. You just really need to do the homework and find out what's good, what's not good, what you can live with, what goes with your life. And in doing that, I actually set the clues up based on the traits of the dog itself. So the dog is an intricate part of the story and in helping solve it.
Well, it's refreshing to read because that is not always the case. And so I really found myself enjoying that. And I was also thinking, wow, this Aussie Shepherd would be like a wonderful, pet to have. And then I could sort of Nancy Drew with her. But I don't know. I don't think my cat would take to that, but maybe someday. So another thing I wanted to ask you about is the sense of community that's built within particularly cozy mysteries, because a lot of times I find that I and probably other readers as well, we come back, as much for the people in the books and the place in the books as the crimes that are being investigated. And I think, in Cat's case, here is an example where family is not only, the people that we are given, the blood, the people, the family that we're born into, but also those people that we choose and who become very intimately connected with us. So can you tell us about that sense of community that you build within the books? And then also how in this book in particular, you were able to bring that community to Cat, even though, you know, she thinks that she's isolated on this island in Australia, she still has that support system and she sees it work for her throughout the book.
Well, for Kat, this was a real eye-opening experience for her, that this family really is there for her. And I think this was a big pivotal point in the series for her to really believe that she has this family, whether it's by blood, like you said, or chosen. Her Aunt Charlotte is her blood relation. Of the other family, she's just starting to get to know her mother again. They've been estranged for a long time, and her mother plays a part in the story as well. But even her uncle, which is Uncle G, who is not related to her, but is very far removed related to her Aunt Charlotte, plays a big part as well. And of course, Sandy, who is her assistant, you can't have a better sister. And this is the sister that she chose, that they work so well together as a team to try to solve things. And of course, now she's a husband who is equally as involved in this particular case off camera in this book because he can't help her. But as we move forward in the series, he'll become a very big part of assisting her as she grows further.
Sure. Yeah, I think we all need a Sandy. She's terrific. I was thinking, where's my Sandy? But it's funny that you would mention, you know, that Russ is mostly off the page in this book because there are opportunities for Cat to explore Australia and, you know, have food and drinks. And occasionally, you know, she finds herself enjoying that and then has the guilt of, well, I'm enjoying this and my husband's, you know, incarcerated somewhere. It's just, you know, another one of those fun little elements that works throughout the book. But I say, you might as well enjoy what you can in a situation like that. A girl's got to eat, a girl's got to drink. Might as well be something good.
And then you can feel guilty about it later.
Yes, you can always feel guilty about it later. That's why I look the way that I do. But let me ask you, another thing that I found very fascinating is the insights into stones and jewelry, because there is some lore in this book about treasure, about missing diamonds, and also pearls. And you yourself studied gemology, and so now you get to sort of bring that expertise into these books. So I'm wondering if you can talk about, you know, specifically to Aussieed to Death, the diamonds, the pearls, and the idea of the lore, but then also, you know, how that background influences these books and sort of the investigatory approach, because I would assume in that study you are sort of a detective. You're just, you know, you're looking into maybe stones as opposed to crimes. So if you wouldn't mind talking about that, I think people would probably enjoy the insights that you bring into this.
Well, I'm a true closet treasure hunter. I would love to be able to go search for treasure. So it's putting it on the page and at some point finding it is kind of a nice thing. This book, I really was interested in not looking at diamonds because the previous three had dealt with the hunt for the Douglas diamond. So I wanted something a little bit different. And Australia leads itself, it has a long history of pearling in the Northern Territories. And as I started doing some more research on pearls, I was absolutely fascinated with it. I had studied it when I was at the Gemology Institute, but I was always a diamond girl. Everything that glittered was something that I found really fun. So the pearls to me were understanding a little bit more about what they were and how more natural they were in terms of the way they're grown was quite fascinating. When I was in Australia diving, giant clams they were just so beautiful. The colors and the vast, it was just amazing. It was an amazing animal. That finding out that they actually create pearls was something else that never occurred to me. When I was in Australia, I also ended up bringing home abalone pearls, which are blue pearls. I'd never seen them before until I was in Australia. So again, a big history for that particular type of gem in Australia. So it just fit perfectly in terms of talking about that.
Sure. It's funny how that works, and sort of, you know, how I found myself having a deeper appreciation for dogs after reading this book. I had that, you know, same response to reading about pearls, because again, I think that we often overlook them and take them for granted. And really, it's kind of astounding to read about. So I loved, you know, learning that there. So in your author's note, I always love to read author's notes and acknowledgments. I find them fascinating. Sometimes I enjoy them as much as the books themselves. But you do acknowledge, that you, like so many authors, have to use some creative license from time to time for the purposes of story. So I'm wondering if you can tell us about what is your approach to balancing that kind of latitude necessary for the story you're telling while still maintaining an overall sense of realism or authenticity so you don't take your reader completely out of the story.
That is so hard to do, and that's a balancing act. In this particular story, what I ended up doing was when I found out about the lost diamonds, which is a true historical fact, that were in Rome, which is a long way from where Lizard Island is on the east coast of Australia. The poetic license had to be, how do I get it there? How do I get these diamonds from point A to point B during World War II? Because the Japanese were surrounding all of northern Australia, and it would have been very difficult, even for the Pearl Looper to get all the way to 1,500 miles into that area. So it's sort of that step of disbelief to say, you're going to have to go with me on this one. They did it.
Most of us don't know any better anyway. So sometimes it's funny, you don't realize it's creative license until someone acknowledges that, hey, maybe I took a few liberties here, but makes for a good story.
I don't know that boat would have made it with the Japanese submarine. The kind
of stuff All right, so I am going to take you a trip back in time for a moment, because one of the things that I read is that something we have in common is a childhood love of Nancy Drew. I grew up on Nancy Drew. I swear she was my gateway to Mary Higgins Clark, which sort of led me to everything I've read since then. But you had the unique experience of reading a Nancy Drew book and thinking, hey, I can write a more personally satisfying ending to this story. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing that moment, and then also what some of the other seminal moments on your path to publication were. Sort of how did you find yourself on this path, and are there touchstones that you can recall that helped you along the way?
Well, I think my start with Nancy Drew really started the way I think about everything. Yes, I like history. I've always been a what if, not necessarily that I didn't believe the ending, but more, what if they'd done this instead? And I think that's really what drives me to write. Is I find an event that occurred that I find very interesting, and then build on what that event is. So as I was learning the craft and writing for many years, I kind of veered off that process. I started writing series, what's expected of me, and I think I made a mistake, that I really should have continued along what intrigued me and what my voice was telling me to write, which was let's come up with a more satisfying ending. Let's come up with what could have been.
Sure. Fair enough. I think so many of us mute that voice too, because we think that other people know what's right for us. So let me ask you too, self-publishing, it has become, a much more commonplace and accepted thing now. I remember, 20 or so years ago, it was taboo, which I always thought was ridiculous. It's sort of the wave of the future, especially now with so many traditional publication routes sort of becoming more narrow or closed off to people. These books are beautiful. They look great. They read great. And so I'm wondering if you have words of guidance for people who are considering whether or not, self-publication is the right thing for them. What are some of the best practices? And I'm, thinking cover art, formatting, editing, even things like marketing and publicity. What do you think that people should keep in mind when they're weighing that decision?
Well, for me, the choice of self-publication was actually pretty easy. My past life has been sales and marketing. So I felt that I wanted to be in control of my titles. I wanted to be in control of the content of the books. I didn't want somebody to narrow what my choices were, especially when the characters were telling me to go in a different direction. And with that in mind, I chose to self-publish. But I think some of the best advice I can give someone who's actually thinking about that is to write the book, rewrite it again. And just because your mother, your best friend, and a coworker absolutely love it, rewrite it another time. because at the end of the day, it is absolutely critical to have a quality piece of literature. You can hire someone to do the cover, to do the art on it. All that is easily farmed out to do. It's the content that absolutely matters. And if you do choose to self-publish, you control what that content is versus someone else forming what that content is. So you're telling your story, not somebody else, but not what somebody else thinks the story should be.
Right. That's excellent advice. And it makes me think, and this again was probably a decade or two ago, but I had a friend who was considering self-publication, and she went to a writer's meeting and she met a gentleman who had just self-published his first book. And so she was sort of picking his brain about the editorial process. And he said, what editorial process? I just put the book out there, and if I need to make changes, I'll do it in the, in the second edition. And I think her head blew off, and she was like, you're the reason, self-publishing sometimes gets a bum rap, because that's exactly, what you shouldn't be doing. But that was many years ago. And I think that we have advanced since then. I hope that we have. But
absolutely. I mean, some of the quality of the self-published is just fantastic at this point. It's changed the world for a lot of people, and for information getting out, and for stories being told that would not have been told 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And the thing I love, and we'll talk about this again because you do have more books to tease at the end of the episode, but you don't have to wait a year or two for the next book to come out. If it is done and ready, you are in control of that. And then lucky readers like me might get 2 books a year because nobody's telling you, hey, you can't do that, it's too soon. I love that.
I'm hoping for 3.
That's awesome. That makes readers very happy. And these are quick reads, which I love. There's a lot of subtext, but you can really, really enjoy this book and not feel put out knowing that there's going to be 2 more in the year. It's actually just something to look forward to. But so you gave us, some great advice and specifics to self-publishing. But I want to ask you, in a more general sense, in looking back in your career as a writer or as a creative being, what do you think is the best advice that you were ever given, and then the best advice that you were never given and had to sort of learn for yourself throughout the process of doing the work? I know you said, you have to learn to listen to your own instincts about what the story should be. And if that is your best advice, that is fair. But if you have anything you want to add to that, please do.
I thought about that pre our conversation. I said, the best advice I was ever given was actually by a published author who wrote many, many books in romance. And what she said to me is, write what you know. And I'm like, okay, that's good advice, right? Why didn't she tell me write what you love? Because there's a very big difference between things that you do in your normal life and something that you have a grand passion for. And I really think the difference between a good story and a great story is just that. It's the author's passion that goes into the book itself.
I love that. I think that's an excellent perspective, because yes, you can know a lot of things, but if you don't have curiosity or passion, are you really going to want to commit to it for years and years? Maybe not. So excellent. All right. Final question. And I sort of already spoiled this a bit. I was going to ask what you were at liberty to tell us about what comes next, because I hear that there's going to be a holiday themed book, and then there's a spring book for 2024 that's coming hot on the heels of that. So your readers have much to look forward to.
Oh, I'm so excited. The Christmas book is so much fun. It is about 2 dachshunds. And if, as you know, Cat has dealt with 1 dog at a time up until this point. And she has her hands full with a gingerbread dog house contest going on at the same time. This is back at Barkview, and it's a treasure hunt. There's another treasure to be found. So she's just running around in circles, having a great time, trying to figure out what the next step is with these dogs all over.
So harrowing holiday for Cat, but
exactly. And I have to tell you, there is a song that goes with this. So I wrote the 12 Days of Barkview Christmas, and working on production of it right now, so it releases at the same time as the book. It is so cute. I can't sing, but I'll give you a little piece of what it is. On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a puppy underneath the Christmas tree.
Oh my gosh, I love it. See,
So
that was an experience.
kind of goes like that with all the different breeds of dogs in it going up to the 12 days. Oh, it's such a riot. I love it.
That's outstanding. I am a sucker, for mysteries, but holiday themed mysteries, like even better. I am down for that book. And it'll be out really, really soon.
Yes, it will be actually. It will release the first week in November. It's in final editing now.
Most excellent. And I know that there's a book slated for, I believe, spring of 2024. Anything you want to tease about that?
It's going to be about a bat dog. So it's a baseball book. So instead of a bat boy, we have a bat dog. So of course, Barkview now has to have a minor league baseball team.
That is excellent. You are finding the most amazing ways to keep the series fresh. I love it.
Well, this one will be a lot of fun. Retriever to Death should be. It's starting out to be just a lot of fun, and I'm waiting for the dog to tell me what the next step is right now.
Fair enough. C.B. Wilson, thank you so much for being here. We have much to look forward to. And now, readers like me who are new to your work have just a little bit of time to catch up on 6 or 7 books before the next 2 or 3 hit. But we can do it, and we want to do it. So thank you for being here and sharing your stories with us.
And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.